Today, we're going to look at how to use AppScript to manage creating new client or project tabs when you want one for each project or client that you have. So, here we have a list of projects. We have our base template that we'll use. And then here we have our project one. And so, what we want to be able to do is to create a script that will automatically create projects two and three, and then any more that we might add later. And then we'll add some special features like a hyperlink that will take you to that project tab, and then how to bring data back from those tabs into this main display using the indirect formula. So let's start with our app script. So we'll go to extensions and app script, and then this will create a script that's tied to this Google Sheet. So let's go ahead and name this. We can call it something generic like script project, or you can name it something specific for that Google Sheet. And then we're going to create a function. We'll just reuse this one here and we'll call this add new projects. And then we need to do a couple things in here. So first of all, we need to access this Google Sheet itself. And then we need to get a couple tabs. We need to get the projects tab and then the names of the projects here. And then we'll compare it to what tabs we already have to determine any new ones we need to create. And then we'll need to access this template tab for any new sheets or tabs that we need to create. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So let's start with that spreadsheet. So SS equals spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet. And that's how we can get the actual Google Sheet itself. And then we can get the tabs or sheet within that. And so let's start with the template and get sheet by name. And we'll do template here. Then we can get our project sheet. SS.get sheet by name again. And we'll do projects. And then now let's get our list of tabs and then we'll get our list of projects. So for the tabs or the sheets, so I'll just call it tabs here for now and then get sheets. And this will get all the sheets within that. And then I only need the names. So there's more stuff available in here, but I'm just going to map just the names using this arrow syntax. So I'm not going to necessarily explain how this works. You can go look up JavaScript and mapping, but this little method will give us what we need. So now let's get the actual projects from the project sheet. And so we'll do project sheet, get range, and then we can just look at A2 to A. It's just in column A here. And then we'll probably pull in column B here in a moment. And we'll actually automatically name this here as well. So let's go ahead and actually just bring them both in right now. A2 to B. And then get values, and it'll actually get the values from that sheet. So now let's go ahead and iterate through this. We'll use a for loop. So I equals 0, I is less than project dot length I plus plus. And so this is just how we iterate row by row. And so we're starting, this is our placeholder. And so we're going to start here, and this will be 0. And then we're going to go row by row and check. And so that's what this is accomplishing is we're going to start with 0, which is the first one. And then as long as we still have more in the project length or the number of rows, then we'll keep going. We can do let project equals projects. And then we can refer to that row like this in brackets. And then because we have two columns here, we want to get to that first column. So it's kind of weird because 0 is actually the first column. But that's just, it's because it uses 0 based index. So you don't necessarily have to remember why, but as long as you use 0 to reference that first column, you'll be fine. And then let's do projects I1. And so what this will do is it's going to look at each row in this project sheet, and then this will be the project name and the client name, just like that. So project name, client name. And so we can compare that project to the tabs. So the tabs, we already have the names here. And so let's add an if statement. So if, and let's just make sure that project is not blank. So we'll do that, not equal to blank. And then we want to do and tabs includes project. Now this is reverse. So we actually don't want it to include. And so what we do here, because this is not equals, so we add an exclamation point here. This basically means tabs does not include that project. So in other words, we have not yet created a tab for that project. So project one, it's going to look and find project one. So this is going to be false. And so it won't continue. But if it is true, so in other words, there's not that tab created yet, then we need to create that tab in here. So here's what we'll create. And so let's actually just do a console log, and we'll log that project name. And then we'll run this and see if we get the expected result, which would be project 2, project 3. So one more thing before we run this is I'm going to add this up top. This is just for permission's sake. It's called only current doc. And this means it's only going to ask permissions for this Google Sheet instead of our entire Google Sheets across my Google Drive. And so this just makes it faster and easier when we run this. So if we run it now, review permissions, and then we can select our account. And then all we have to do is click continue. So that's simpler than the other one. So here's our log. It shows up down here when we do console log. And so indeed, we have project 2 and project 3. So it skipped project 1. Now, if we go up here and we console log project here, and then here we could add a little text saying need new tab like this. And let's run this again. So here we have project 1, project 2, need new tab for project 2, project 3, need new tab for project 3. And then here we see the blanks because this is actually removing the blanks as well. So we don't need this any longer. I just wanted to show how that worked. And so now we can create our new logic in here. So we have our template right here. So we can do template and then copy to, and then we want to copy it to the same spreadsheet. So SS right there, we have our spreadsheet. And then we want to set that name. So we want to set that name to the project. So set name and project. So that's going to create our new tabs. So let's go ahead and run this again. And we don't have any console logging, so nothing's showing up there besides start and completed. But if we go back here and check, we can see here is our project 2 and our project 3. Now we have not added the client name. And so let's go ahead and do that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and select these 2 tabs and delete just like that. And then we'll run this again. Now this time, let's go ahead and add that value for the client. So we have the client name right here. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to assign this new copy to a variable. Let's just call it new sheet. And then new sheet, get range. And then what range do we need? So if we go to template, this is C3. So whenever you're looking at a cell, and for example, this one's merged, and so it's CND3, but you want to use the upper left if you have merged. So if you have multiple rows as well, like 3 and 4, you only want C3. So let's get that C3 and then set value and client. So let's try this again, and then we'll add that link. So run this again, started, completed, and now let's go check. So project 2, and there's that client name. Project 3, there's that client name. So perfect. Now let's add this hyperlink. So it's not adding on these. So let's go ahead and look at what that will take. So I'm going to delete these again and then come over here. So what we need to do is get an ID. So if we go over to this link and check, here's what we're actually getting for the link. So this is the ID of the actual sheet or tab. And so if you see this number here, if we come over to project 1 and look up in the hyperlink here, this is that GID right there. So every tab has its own. And so there you can see that one as well. So what we need to do is get that ID. So we can do let new ID, or just ID, I guess, equals to new sheet, get sheet ID. So that will get us that number like this. And then we can just combine it with this hashtag GID equals to. And so we'll do let URL equal to plus ID. Now to add that link to the cell, we need something called rich text. And so we'll do let rich text equals to spreadsheet app, new rich text value. And then we have a couple things here. So we can set text, and this would be that project, and then set link URL, which we already have that URL, and then we can build. So you can optionally also set the text style, but we'll just do the build for now. And then what we're going to do is on that project sheet, we'll get range. And then how do we get back to it? So for example, if we're creating project 2, how do we get back to row 3 to add that link? So if you remember with this for loop, it's starting at 0 for that first row here. So it'd be 0, 1. So it's actually tied to this because when we get to the project 2, this I will be 1. And so if we have 1, and this is 1, and it's row 3, we need to add 2. So 0, add 2 will be 2. And then 1, add 2 will be 3, and so forth. So if we do I plus 2, and if you look, this is our starting range. So if we started at 1, for example, we would do I plus 1. All right, so I plus 2, that's our row. And then for our column, it'll just be column 1. And now we can do set rich text value and our rich text just like that. All right, so that will add our link. So let me make sure there's our project 1. So let's go ahead and run this. When it finishes running, we'll go check. So there you can see project 2. Now it will take us to that project 2 tab. Has that client name. Perfect. So next, let's actually add a menu that'll show up here that allows us to click to add new projects instead of having to go to extensions and app script and then running it here. So what we'll do here is add a new function called onOpen. And what this will do is every time the Google Sheet is opened, this will run and we can use it to display a menu. So we'll do spreadsheet app get UI, and then we can do create menu, and we can call script menu or add new project, wherever you want, and then add an item. And this is where we can say add new project tabs, and then add new projects. So the second part has to match our function name exactly. This part is what's going to be displayed, and then this is the function. And then finally, add to UI. So that's all we need to create that menu. And so if we click here on open, and this is just going to be manually triggering it. Otherwise, if we just refresh, that'll show up automatically. So we can hit run. And then if we look here, there's that script menu. So let's go ahead and just delete this real quick to make sure it works from here. And delete that one. Or yeah, we'll just reset that right there. And then there's no link right now. Let's go ahead and add new project tab. So there we go. Now it's added just like we expected. So that's one way that you can run the script is from a menu item like this. Another thing you can do is add a trigger. And so if we go over here to this clock symbol and click on triggers and then create a new trigger, there is different options that we can do. So the function we want to run is that add new projects. And if we come down here, we can see what we can use to trigger it. So first of all, we could actually trigger every time we open the spreadsheet. Other options, we could use potentially an on edit, but I'm not going to cover that in this one. If you go look at my other videos on edit, that will show you how you can incorporate that. So I want to show you the time driven. And so here you could check multiple times a day. You could do hour, like every hour you could check. You could do daily, and you could check every night in the middle of the night if you want when no one's using the spreadsheet. You could check it multiple times a day, but let's just say we want to check every night. Then we do day timer, 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., click save. And now this trigger is going to check every night. And if there's any projects that don't have a project tab, it will create them then. Now, if you ever want to close this out, not use this anymore, come over here and do delete trigger. All right, so let's go back here now. So we're actually done with the script for now. So let's go ahead and close that down. So next, let's look at how to pull data back from these tabs into the main sheet. So let's go ahead and add a couple things here. Let's add some dates, maybe February, something like that. And then we want to bring that data back into here. So I already have formulas in place. And so let me explain what's happening. So we have an indirect, and so it allows us to actually create a formula reference. And so let's actually look at what that formula reference would actually be. So let's come over here and pick that start date. And so here is our actual reference. So project 2, or the tab name, exclamation point, and then the cell reference, so D5. And so you can see up here in the indirect, we have a very similar thing. So there's the cell reference, or project 1, and then ampersand, double quotes, and then our exclamation point and our cell reference. So let's go ahead and build it here. So equals indirect A3, ampersand, double quote, exclamation point, and then D5, double quote, and our closing parentheses. Now, if I drag this down, you can see it pulls automatically from project 3. So when we don't have anything over here, then you can see it shows up blank. Now, if I add project 4, you can see now it has a ref error. And that happens because there's not a project 4 tab. So let's go ahead and add our client real quick here and then run our script. And now you can see it's blank. So let's go ahead and add that start date. And now it'll show up just like that. So we can just leave it just like this if you want. And then every time you create the new tabs, that it fills in. So at this point, I have the rest of these built out. And so this is indirect for D6. And so I'm just coming over here and grabbing that cell. And so we can take all these, drag them down, and then you can see those shoot on just like that. So if we come down here, we're having this error because this is D6. And what it's resolving to is actually trying to look at the exact same sheet. So let's add one thing in here. We'll do if A2 is blank, we'll do 2 commas, and that just means do nothing. So if we drag that down and then come over here, if A2 is blank, drag that down. Now you can see it gets rid of that error for us. And then we'll drag both of those down. And now those formulas are all filled in. And so because this is a table, if you add more rows, those formulas are automatically going to be in there. And so if you look, there's the formula right there, just like that. And so this will keep working as long as you keep adding projects. All right, so let's wrap up with adding conditional formatting on here to match what we have on these. So let me go ahead and just pick this not started, for example. And then I have a plugin here to pick the colors. So you can do this however which way you want. And then let's close that out, go back to here. And then we'll make sure to select that column there, format, conditional formatting. And then now we can add that color. So I'm just going to paste that color in there and then change that to white for the text. And then change this to text is exactly not started. And then you can see it shows up just like that. So let's check the next one, in progress. And then I'm going to again grab this and then come back to here. And I'm just going to copy this one. So click on it, add another rule, and then change this. Let's make sure we're on the background there. Paste in our new color. And this will be in progress. And then let's check our next one, on hold. Again, do the same thing. Grab this one, add another rule. Hold. Change this. That. And so let's go ahead and do project 4 on hold so you can see that. And then let's change this one to completed and this one to in progress, just so we can see all of those there. So the only one we have not done here is completed. So let's go ahead and add that one. Completed. And then I didn't grab the color yet. So let's go to completed and then grab that color. Come back here and come back and change this. So if you have this closed out and you're trying to figure out how to get back to it, you can just click anywhere in here, format and conditional formatting. So you may see something like this when you show up and you're like, well, where's my rules? So the issue is you're not selected in where the rules are being applied. So if I click it back in here, you can see there's the rules because they're only being applied in column D. But there's our rules. If you happen to want to delete one, you can just click this trash icon there to remove the rule. Otherwise, that's good to go. So let's add one more over here. So on the difference, we're just going to do if it's greater than or equals to 0, we'll change it to green. And then we'll flip that around and then do less than 0 and change that to red. That way, if we're over budget, we can see that there. All right, so that is it for today's video on how to use AppScript to help you streamline managing, creating new project or client tabs. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.